All right, it's 1:30. Let's bring the 2020-2021 Yamhill County Budget Committee back in session.
All right, so our next budget team that we're going to hear from is the Culture and Recreation. And both are Gary's on the phone. So let's see, we're going to be, there's a tab for the fair. So we're going to start, Gary Works, the fair manager, is going to go over the fair budget. So go ahead, Gary.
All right, well, I want to thank everybody for allowing me to talk about the fairgrounds. And so, as you know, the biggest changes we've made to our budgets is the separation of the fair from the yearly event center. We've been working hard on phasing that in. So we have a more accurate budget for the fair versus the event center. Our goal is to associate the income and cost of the entity that incurs it. Right now, they're kind of intermixed for everything. Yeah, but it also gives me a chance to show our sponsors, just what the fair is doing or what the event center is doing, because there's opportunities for both entities to have that.
Gary, I'm going to interrupt just really quickly, and so the committee can see what he's talking about. If you look at page 30, and if you look at the revenues on page 30 for GL code 2080 for all the 300 numbers, you'll see that what's new for this year, if you look at the proposed budget, the amounts are significantly lower than what they were last year. And if you turn to page 32, then you're going to see where the revenues are showing up there. So historically, this budget, all the revenues would be in 2080, but the expenses were split up between the fair and the event center. In order to, just like Gary was saying, more clearly delineate the revenues and expenses for both. What's new for this year is we broke up those revenue lines to show the revenues for county fair and then for the event center. So, all right, sorry to interrupt, Gary. I just wanted to make sure everybody saw what you were explaining.
Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't even think about that part of it. So the budget basically is based on the forecast that we had that we were going through another great year, in which we were up until mid-March. So the fairgrounds the event center keeps getting busier and busier, and the fairs get bigger. Unfortunately, also see that we're well on our way. And right now, I'm sorry, I'm stumbling here. Right now, we've 75% of the shows that we've booked that were booked here March, April, May, June, have moved to the fall, which is historically is our slow period. Where we have a period between, let's say, between the Labor Day and Christmas that's pretty slow out here. Okay, so what happens is that everything's going to the fall. A lot of the events have already moved to the fall this year. So right now, the other biggest question is that we don't know if we're going to have a fair this year. All depends on discussions with the fair board and whatever the state decides to do.
Gary, I'm going to have you pause for a minute.
Yep, that's fine.
Jessica, stop sending messages.
I want to see another message where she says 10-4, affirmative.
Okay, Gary, we're going to need you to just back up just a little bit and then go ahead and resume your presentation.
I don't know if I can figure out where I'm at.
The fair.
So, county fair 2080,
Are we gonna have one is a good question. Right now, I spend a lot of my days watching what the state is doing, trying to figure out, to make advice the fair board on which way to go. So anyway, as we've been making budget models for if we have a fair, if we don't have a fair, and if we have a small fair. So we're trying to come up with different scenarios as we go along. Because everything is such up in the air, so that's why I opted to leave the budget alone the way it is until we can know where to go, because it's, like I said, everyone's in the same boat I'm in, trying to figure out what's gonna happen. So anyway, like I said, there's gonna be a lot of changes. If we don't have a fair, there's gonna be quite a few changes. Even if we do have a fair, a lot of it's gonna have to do with looking at, expenditures are gonna have to be really tied up. So, there's a lot of those type of things, and, just like I would have to do in any business of machinery business I've been this time of year, you gotta make the most you can with the least amount of expenditure. So that right now is kind of what's going on. We're trying to be upbeat. But I'm like I said, it's just been such a turmoil trying to decide where we're going to be at here in about a month. So if any of you have any questions, I know I've kind of just glanced over this, but I think everything is doable.
Gary, it's Mary. I just want to ask you, as far as the acts go, have you canceled the entertainment or have any plans to?
I have the option of canceling that at any time, and there's a provision in the contracts for that. So we have not canceled anything yet.
Thank you.
That was my question too. Thank you.
Gary, this is Rick. I'd like really to, thought it was a good idea based on all of our previous conversations last couple of years of splitting out the fair as an event and the event center as a actual kind of department, because I know with everything before under one budget, it was hard to tell what the event center was doing and hard to tell what the fair was doing. And being that basically we don't have a lot of capital improvement money put away for the event center, and they're county-owned buildings, and that was covered under the fair event, that I think it kind of skews things, and it makes it look like we're not putting any money into capital improvements in that particular at the fairgrounds, when we do have the county buildings. But I'm really glad you divided that out, Gary.
Well, thanks, Rick. I'm gonna thank Mike, Finance, for helping us do all this. He spent quite a few hours out here working on this. The biggest thing is that, like you said, the event center is what's gonna, is what I plan to put the capital improvements in. The fair doesn't need any capital improvements, it just needs buildings to hold it in. So the rest of the buildings on the property, are used 12 months out of the year. So that's kind of the direction I took it in. There's arguments pro and con on both sides.
Well, I know I certainly agree with the direction you and Mike took it in.
Okay, thank you.
well, is there anything else you wanted to cover with the actual budget and the numbers that you have in here, Gary?
Actually, no, like I said, this forecast is based on what we were forecasting the next year due to the bookings that we already have in place for 21 and 22. We have some already into 22. I think if things would open back up for mass events, gathering, which is what we classified under, I think I'll be so busy here I won't know what to do with myself. This place will be just packed because daily we get calls So I have, for, I'm hoping that, we'll pull everything out by the end of that, by the end of the next budget session, that, things will turn around completely.
Gary, this is Casey. I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
Is there some? I'm sure there's a reason, but I'm wondering why the fair manager and the fair office manager are solely budgeted under the fair event center.
Because the majority of our time is spent there, although that's one of the things we have to work on. This is kind of the first phase of separating things back out. Eventually, we'll capitalize on, my wages and the office manager's, staff's wages for the fair. But I thought we were doing pretty good just to get to this point.
Honestly, the reason most of it's in there is because the fair is an event that is hosted at the facility where the fair manager spends most of their time managing the actual facilities, unlike the fair event, which is an event at the facilities. And that's why historically those positions have been funded in the event center, because that's where Gary, like he was saying, spends most of his time. It's facilities management, looking at facility maintenance and projects, and that's the whole reason it's set up like this for something.
Okay, that mostly answers my question. I'm just kind of wondering why we don't just then, if that's the case, have a line under the expenses and a line under the revenues for the event center that it is the county fair. Do you know what I mean? Like if it's just an event that we have at the county fair or at the event center.
It's something you can do, but now we're talking splitting the FTEs between the two expense categories and what percentage, and if that's something. If there's a desire by the committee to see something to that kind of detail, you can put it in there, but then also recognizing that, as you can see, the way historically the revenues all came into one category, so this was already one change that was made.
Yeah, okay.
And in case,
Gary.
one thing to remember too is because what's really hard about this is you don't have the fair. The reason for the event center is because you have a fair. Because the fair is the actual main entity, believe it or not, the way the statutes are wrote.
Gary, this is Lindsay. Is there kind of a point of no return where we couldn't pull a fair off? If she doesn't open up mass gatherings by June or whenever she extended this through. I mean, do you have a date in mind?
Well, for the big name entertainment, I'll have to have a date. June 1st, it's got to be, but that's up to the fair board. I have to discuss that with them, but June 1st would probably be for that. A couple of the counties have already decided to go to just the little local events, no charge type of things with just the local people. But in our, I've got to be fair to the vendors that come in for the fair. Our carnival, although our carnival's kind of running out of places to go because they're all canceled. So right now, June 1st to take care of some of the other issues.
Right.
Okay, thank you, Gary.
Is there any other questions?
Thank you.
Thanks, Gary.
All right, thanks, Gary.
And I appreciate the weekly updates, by the way.
Okay, I'll keep it coming.
All right, so that's fairgrounds. And now we'll move to parks, which there's a tab for it. Jared, are you there? There we go, there's Jared.
Hi, Jared.
If you want to go ahead and make an introduction, and then go ahead and jump right in.
All right, Jared, the Parks and Work Crew Division Manager. Everything's moving pretty well in parks until COVID popped up. Like all departments, we've been affected. We've actually closed all of our parks and programs at this time. The Yamhill County Parks utilize the inmate work group program, and since the COVID pandemic, we've had to cease operations of the work group program utilizing inmates and community service. So the workload of 8 to 20 bodies is now being done by 3 work group supervisors and myself. So we're just trying to keep the grass mowed and stay on top of maintenance at this time until we can reopen following guidelines from the governor's office. So that's kind of where Parks is right now. We're in limbo, but on days I'm not assisting the crew, we are still pushing forward with our capital improvement projects and other clerical and administrative things. Which brings me to the budget. I do need to make a few revisions. As far as our beginning balance, I would like to add $15,000. That's carried over from this year's capital project. It's the Ed Ren Park restroom facility upgrade. And I anticipate to spend $20,000 from this year. So the other 15 I'd like to utilize next year to finish the project. So that would take.
So you're gonna have the beginning balance increase by 15,000, and where are you gonna record the expense?
The expense will go down in
That's a good point.
1081, 83010 park improvements.
All right, so we're gonna increase that by 15,000?
Correct. Yep. With the note of the Ed Ren restroom upgrade.
Okay. All right, thank you, Jared.
And then moving down into our grants, 1081, 33499. On top of the Dayton landing improvements and the placeholder for new state grants, I just presented to the board a Oregon State Marine Board facility improvement grant, which was approved. So that was for $62,788. So I would like to add that into the placeholders for grants. They will make their decision in July, whether it was approved or not. So it is still in limbo. And we will add that expense on 1081, 699, 13. And that is the only real changes, curveballs I was throwing at you guys. No changes in staff or personnel. Expenses are anticipated to be about the same as far as supplies, uniforms, and other utility expenses. For capital projects for this year, we will be purchasing a radio. So that when we're up in our parks without cell service, we can still be in contact with law enforcement if needed or emergency. And on top of that, for park improvements for this next year, $20,000 towards the Deer Creek well and $5,000 towards ADA improvements around the park districts. Quick and dirty of the parks budget.
All right, thanks, Jared.
Thank you, Jared.
Any questions?
Parks Master Plan looks like it's in the budget for this upcoming fiscal year.
Yep, it's still getting pushed forward. Scope of work's being reviewed by county council, and hoping to push that out as next year, potentially. Fingers crossed.
Okay, great.
Okay, if there's no questions, all right.
Thank you, Jared.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the one thing I would call attention to on both the fairgrounds and parks, on just behind the tab, for each of them, you'll see a write-up that both the fairgrounds and parks have prepared. It's something that goes back that was requested several years ago, many years ago. Because they're getting economic development funds, there was a request from the budget committee for them to prepare a memorandum to report back on what the economic development funds are being used for, and, you know, what they're seeing as the positive economic impact of both these programs. So the memorandums are here for you to take a look at. If you have any questions about those, you know, let us know. And I can forward those to Gary or Jared. If there's no questions on that, I'm going to let Justin off the hook, and I'm going to cover, Justin usually covers the SDC fund is another one that we cover as part of culture and recreation on page 36. So on page 36, this is the system development charges, or SDC fund. The SDCs are, it's a parks SDC, but it's split between the fairgrounds and the parks. 60% of the funds go into the fairgrounds account, 40% goes into the parks. The first category, 2939, which is non-departmental, this is basically the administrative portion of the SDC fund. 2980, this is the fair balance. The fair has a history of spending these SDC funds using on various capital projects. There are limitations per statute on what you can spend system development charges on. It has to be true capital expenditures. The fairgrounds has spent quite a bit. You get into 2981, this is a little bit different. We're a pass-through for system development charges for the Yamhill Parks District. So anything that occurs within the district that goes through our planning office and SDC is charged and collected, and we pass through. As soon as we get those funds, we pass it on to the park district. So that's 2981, and then you get into 29181. This is our own local parks SDC. That again, these are the funds that Jared has available to him for projects on capital. And Jared did include, like he does every year in his section, it's not marked on a page, but it would be on page 33 is the list of his 10-year capital improvement list that allows him to spend those funds. So county SDCs hasn't changed very much over a long time. Chehalem Parks, you can, if you look at the history, you'll see the amounts of increase. Chehalem Park District did a pretty large increase a few years ago, and then they've been doing tied to, I don't remember which CPI or what index they're tied to, but they've been doing annual increases on the SBC funds. And so then you'll see that in 17-18, it was 140,000, 18-19, 73,000, and we have 231,000 budgeted for this year. Although it looks like the numbers are trending down a little bit, but we want to make sure that we're able to capture, again, this is a pass-through, we get the money, we release it straight off. So, any questions on SBC?
Why are the Yamhill County ones 40% lower? What, and this, they were 135, now they're 78. What is changing from?
So if you look at under parks, Jared has, it looks like he's spending a portion. So if you see the beginning balance, 135, and he has a number of projects that are underway, which is, looks like that's why it was, the beginning balance was 78,000. Usually based on charges, it's anywhere from $6,000 to $7,000 a year that comes into it. So that lower beginning balance is because Jared wants to have projects underway as we speak. A lot of years past, we usually have Gary and Jared still sitting in the room to talk about the specific projects and what they've spent. that's why the beginning balance is what it is.
Ken, I guess I could ask this to Justin, but on, if I look at his 10-year capital improvement plan, the CIP, he has, the first item, of course, is that add new flush restroom at Granville,
Uh-huh.
for 85,000. But then down below, he has replace existing restroom with single vault restroom and replace it for Granville. So seems like those, are we gonna have 2 restrooms at it in Granville?
That's
Well-
Deer Creek. Is that Deer
Or
Creek?
is
Yeah,
that Stewart?
Well, if you look at it,
It's the new one on this side of the boat or the bridge. Sorry, I should say.
so he's going to add a flush restroom, which is an additional
Okay, that's-
restroom. And then
that's-
the other one is replacing the other 2 restrooms that are on the other side of the
Bridge.
near the picnic shelter.
Yeah. So that there's one next to the shelter. Still.
So that is for adding.
So one's new and the other one's replacing. And that's culture and recreation. Now we'll. And Friday.
Yeah, Carolina. How can Danny get on Wi-Fi here? Why is he open? Is it
Yes. What's the password?
password?
That's probably have a function for candidates. Wish I had a whiteboard. Thought it might be helpful because I know a lot of times we throw out the term GL codes and what we're tracking and what we refer to. I'm on page 36, which is the SBC, and if you look at the very top line, which is the beginning balance, the numbers that we throw out a lot of times when we're talking about GL, which is the general ledger code. If you look at the center column, 29, 029 is the budget, it's the department. 039 is the division within that department or fund. And then the type code, the 301.01 is the type code. And a lot of times, if it's a 300 series, it's going to be a revenue. If it's in 500 or 600 series, you get down into materials and services, or if it's 800s, it gets down into capital. A lot of times we don't slow down and kind of explain how to read the GL codes that are built into the budget. But a lot of times when I refer to Fund 10, I'm talking about everything that starts with the 10, 010, which is the Fund 10 budget. And like admin is 1010. So administrative services is it's a 10 number for general fund and also a 10 number for the division. And if it's a beginning balance, it would be a 301.01. And so a lot of times we kind of get into the rush and we just start throwing out, oh yeah, go to line 2939, 780.55, and well, wait a minute, where is that? So,
Thank you, Ken.
and
For
Yeah,
me,
so
that
if you hear
helps.
any 100, you're like, oh, I'll just go to the capital improvement.
Chasing tail here, so.
But if you have questions with that, I mean, that's the breakdown of the GL code is, and you'll see it like the next one, which is planning, and I see that Ken Friday has just signed in, which is on page 37. You will see that planning is in Fund 10, it's 10-20, so it's a general fund, which is 10-20, which is the planning division of Fund 10. So. All right, Ken, can you hear us okay, or are you there?
I am here and I can hear you just fine.
All right, Ken, this is Ken. So next up is Ken Friday. He's our planning director, and he's going to go over Fund 10-20.
All right, and I am on page 37. And before I start, I wanted to say that I've been looking at our revenues since March 13th, when I kind of gave that as the date when the pandemic kind of affected our day-to-day operations. And I've been looking at it every week to see if we have had a significant drop off. I was doing that in part to see if I needed to revise the budget for next year. And I'm both surprised and pleased to report that, at least as of last Friday, our revenues have remained steady. In addition, we're fielding a lot of planning questions and have been seeing a steady number of planning applications, which is typically an indication of building activity that we anticipate for this summer. And I partly credit this to the this steadiness of revenue, to the fact that our office really has done its best to adjust quickly to the new requirements, and I credit my staff completely for that. My understanding was a few other jurisdictions closed down their inspections, at least for a time. Our office has worked through it with adjustments, sometimes major adjustments, but we figured out a way, I think, to work safely and continue with the inspections, and I really appreciate how folks around here have stepped up. All of this is to explain that why I have not adjusted any of my budget numbers from those that I presented in February. At the time I was presenting these, I looked at it, and when I was making the budget numbers up in January, I always shoot a little bit low, and so I was reading all these things about a recession being possible, and so I've only done 3/4 of what I anticipate we're going to be getting for this year. So I already have built in a buffer, and so that's just to explain that. Page 37, I actually don't have anything specific to note on page 37, but I'm here if anyone has any questions about page 37.
And I would just add one thing to call out that's a little unique with this budget after going over the GL code and pointing out that Ken's budget is in Fund 10 General Fund. There's actually only a very small amount. I want to say it's 45,000 or right around that is transferred from discretionary revenues into planning, and that's strictly for GIS services. And you'll see that when we get down into the materials and services lines. But the county has given Ken some discretionary to pay for countywide GIS services. We contract with Willamette Valley Council of Governments, Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments, to provide those services. Otherwise, all of Ken's budget, even though it's in Fund 10, all of his budget is built off of the revenues that he generates for service fees and permits and licenses. All right, take it away, Ken. Thank you.
All right, I'm going on to page 38 unless I hear any objections. All right, on page 38, this is a standard budget with 3 exceptions. I'm requesting to take 0.6 of an associate planner and make a 0.6 senior planner with a pay range of 22. And then I would be taking a 1.0 FTE of an associate planner and making an associate planner / GIS specialist. And I've outlined the reasons for this, for these two, actually all 3 of these in a memo, and I can respond to any questions you have about this. I have identified this as 1.6 senior planners, which means that Lance, who would be the one that would be the GIS specialist, would actually be underfilling that senior planner position. And that's on line item 403.12. And then lastly, I'd like to take one of my building inspector assistants and create a senior building inspector assistant due to her ICC certification and her basically picking up some of the slack from one of our retiring building inspectors. And of course, I have budgeted for all three of these, and the senior building inspector assistant is line 403.17. And I'm ready to go on to page 39 unless there are questions.
No, looks good, Ken.
Okay, keep going.
All right, page 39, as Ken noted, line 611.05, that's our $45,997 for GIS services. This is the only general fund money we receive. I think this year we will be spending close to that amount because Public Works is working on some GIS projects that involve these folks. And I just wanted to note that's really the only thing that we get from general fund. Going down towards the bottom third of the page, line 780.05, the motor pool, put in additional money and worked with Russ at Public Works to figure out the additional money to put in to purchase an additional truck for inspections. And those are the only two things I have to note on those two pages. Unless there are questions, I was going to go on to page 40. It's just the solid waste department. The solid waste department, this is a standard budget. The staffing level has not changed. The solid waste coordinator, Ashley Watkins, is split between the solid waste department at 0.6 FTE and the planning with septic inspections at 0.4 FTE. She was hired that way, and I confirmed that's what she wants to do. She wants to learn both fields. On specific line items, I only have a few that I want to note. The two lines at the top of the page under beginning balance, those are lines accounts 403.11 and 403.12. These numbers project the in-county and out-of-county tipping fees that we get from Riverbed Landfill, and we're guaranteed $20,000 per month as a base minimum. And I anticipate that we will just be getting the base minimum of $20,000 a month, which is split between those two funds. My concern is if Riverbed closes, that money will not be received, and for this reason, I did not add any staff to the solid waste department. And that's all I have for page 40. I'm not trying to rush, so if you have any questions, let me know.
Sounds good, Ken.
The other thing I would call out that is new is if you look at 380.19, which is county internal interfund loan principal, you'll see that amount has gone up, and part of that is we added this year the Board of Commissioners approved an interfund loan for helping cover shortfalls on the jail camera project. There was still amount of the project that wasn't covered, so we did an interfund loan from solid waste and from motor pool to cover that. And then you'll see it later in Fund 40 where the repayments are happening back to these individual funds. So that's budgeted here to start the initial payments to repay the funds that were borrowed. All right. Thanks, Ken. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's fine. I'm going on to page 41, and I do have a few items on this page. About a third of the way down is the post-closure for Newburgh landfill. We we're required to budget $885,000 per year on this. We only spend a fraction of it. The DEQ wants us to have that money budgeted. And my hope is that Yamhill Park and Rec District has talked about taking over Newburgh landfill. I'm very hopeful that they will at some point. That would free up some money and some staff time, because we do actively do work on Newburgh post-closure to monitor that and to maintain that. Skipping down to line 670.03, roadside garbage pickup. I did increase this line item significantly because we've been having solid waste and RV disposal issues. We've had several sites during the past year that had a significant amount of trash, and a few that included recreational vehicles that really weren't RVs any longer, but were more solid waste. And those have been expensive to dispose of. So, and I unfortunately anticipate that we're going to have more situations involving this type of disposal. And so I increased that line item to $25,000.
Thank you, Ken.
Is there any questions?
Thank you, Ken. This is Casey. Thanks for doing that.
Ken, this is Lindsay.
Skipping down, does someone have a question?
Yes.
When you say increase in RV solid waste disposal, how many is that, like, on average, and what does it cost to?
You know, it really depends on the RV, but it can be closing in on $10,000 for
Ouch.
a large RV and the frame and the solid waste. But if it's small, if it's a small pickup, there might be some recycling that can be done to recoup some of the fees. But it's a wide range of fees, and we trying to think of one that we had that I think was a site of $3,000 to clean up and to dispose of one recreational vehicle. I also did this partly because Gail of Gail's Towing gave me a call and said that he's having a lot of problems getting rid of some of these RVs, and that there is an agreement for the towers to take them, but I think it's presumed that the tower would be getting something that of an operational vehicle, and some of these are not just non-operational, but really are solid waste.
Thank you.
All right, going down to line 730.12, the RRR education program. This fund covers the household hazardous waste collection events. My hope is that we will be able to get back to our regular schedule of household hazardous waste collection events next year. We did have to cancel the one that is usually scheduled for May, but I budgeted for the standard amount for next year, and also a little bit of extra money for what Ashley is hoping to do as a paint-only event in the Sheridan area, which last year, from my understanding, was a success. And I think lastly, right down at the bottom of the page, line 990.03, reserve for future. I'm requesting to have $200,000 put into this line item for reserve for the future in case Riverbend does close, to have some funds available in case we need to cover some costs. And that ends anything that I have on page 41. Are there any questions?
No questions, Ken?
I don't know, do you want to do in the page 42, the landfill license reserve?
Yeah, why don't I go ahead and cover this one? Because this isn't, we always have the two together, but this one's not really. Again, you have the landfill license reserve. We've had in the past, previous committees and boards have been putting funds into the landfill license reserve. And we have this available for one-time grants or projects that may come up during the budget process, like we'll be discussing this evening. You'll hear some of the requests that are in the binder. Not really hearing it, it's not a public hearing, but you'll be reading about the requests that come in. Unique for this year, you can see that we put the entire balance in an ending balance, and it's only when we get through deliberations, if there's any portion of this on Wednesday that's identified to be awarded out or to fund a project, I'll move that up into a grants awarded line to have appropriation for it. Again, in anticipation, or, if Riverbend landfill closes, this is, we don't have funds necessarily coming back in. We've been keeping the funds in the solid waste fund to pay for active operations and programs and not moving anything into landfill license reserve. So, once this is spent, it's spent, and it's not in the budget. So, any questions about landfill license reserve? All right. Then if you go to page 43, I should have mentioned that Ken covers quite a bit more than just planning budget. So solid waste and surveyor as well. So, all right, Ken, it's to you now.
Yes, the only other things I have on surveyor and corner restoration, these two budgets are standard budgets with one exception. Bill Gilly is going to retire, and so I have upped the extra help surveyor line item and that's line 482.00. That's 482.00 for both corner restoration and for surveyor. Ken Huffer and I have been discussing both short-term and long-term solutions. I put a little extra money in that would be equivalent to $2,000 a month for these two funds, and we're going to keep looking for what I hope will be a long-term solution for a county surveyor. But that's actually the only thing I have for the last 4 pages of the surveyor and corner restoration.
Yeah, and I would just add, because it's we have to have a county surveyor. At this point, since the last, Dan Lynchide was the last surveyor who was the elected surveyor, and then there was a change when he left office that it was no longer an elected position. And so Bill Gilly, who was at the time retired as the county engineer, also held a surveying license. So he was appointed very limited FTE to be able to review the work of the staff, because there is one, you can see the engineer tech, there is a surveying tech who's in the office full time, who works in these budgets, but still you have to have the county surveyor that's reviewing and signing and doing the official capacity. I think this is going to be, like Ken was saying, him and I have been talking about this, and also Mark Lago, the director of public works, has also been involved with the conversation, that we really need a long-term solution. And so this may be something that we may need to actually recruit for a county surveyor, and may need to come back for additional funds to fund that type of position. Because we may have to get some general fund infused into this to help support that kind of position. Do you have anything to add, Ken?
Nope, I think you did.
You're right.
I do have one question. Ken, as I go through the budget, look at the 021-400 budgets, especially with the surveyor, what do we pay, and you talk about we may have to come up with more funding. What do we pay now between our contract surveyor and the portion of Bill Gilly's salary that gets paid out of that?
If you,
Right.
oh, go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I was gonna say right now, it's right at $10,000 a year or $820 a month that we have between the surveyor and corner restoration to pay for Bill Gilly. Basically, Marty Glass in our office is our survey tech that checks the calculations on the surveys and then passes on to Bill Gilly to review his calculations and then sign the plats. And so Bill Gilly doesn't have to do too much in the way of hours, and he agreed to do this for basically $820 a month. Right now, we're actually, Bill Gilly is staying at home and we're shipping the plats over. I've got someone that actually commutes to Salem right by Bill Gilly's house, and so they meet up and have him review and sign anything. So because physically you do need sometimes to have that surveyor signature, but it's essentially $10,000 a year that we're doing right now.
Okay, so we don't use any private surveyors like Matt Dunkel or any of those kind of surveyors?
That's correct. Yeah, at this point we don't.
Okay, thanks, Ken.
Wasn't that what the extra help line is?
That's what we beefed up the extra
Yeah.
help for in
That's
case
what
we
I'm
need to
asking.
do that.
The institutional knowledge of Bill Gilly, how do you, I mean, I just see so many industries dealing with this same thing of guys like that retiring that know everything.
Yeah.
How do you, as a county, how do you gather that information?
Who am I?
I'm just saying, like,
No, that's.
I mean, I've been dealing with him for 20 years, and he's the guy that just, everybody says, go ask him, and he knows everything.
And I joke it, but it seems like this is the fifth time he's retired.
Yeah.
No, I agree.
Recently, we all looked at a Supreme Court decision from 1978 where it referred to the county engineer, and it was Bill Gilly.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
I was like, look, you got a quote here in the Supreme Court. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big loss of knowledge. I mean,
Yeah.
It is
Everybody-
terminology.
It is.
no.
But you'll hear, because one of the things that we were looking at, and you'll hear more in the next presentation when Mark Wago does his presentation for Public Works, we're in the process of essentially hiring his replacement. They were in interviews and everything, and then all of a sudden COVID hit and we couldn't have the second interview, with some of the finalists. And so we're still trying to navigate that with the pandemic, but we are working on trying to get somebody with that project and with that engineering to also come in. And we kind of had our fingers crossed that we were, even though they're not related positions, but if we found out that we had somebody who was filling in the engineering position, who maybe was a licensed surveyor as well, that we may be able to, kill two birds with one stone or feed two birds with one seed. So it's something that we're working on, but there's going to be more discussions that we're going to have with the Board of Commissioners here in the coming weeks about the surveyor. Because we really need to, that's a position we need to fill, and we're experiencing, I think there's some challenges in even contracting someone to fill that role. We may need to do an improvement and actually hire a county surveyor to serve in that position. So, any other questions for Ken? Do you have anything to add, Ken?
Oh, that's it.
All right.
Thank you, Ken.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you, Ken.
My dad retired from Boise. One of the millwrights retired before him.
No,
That had been there for like 40 years or something.
I was wondering the same thing, Carolyn.
He left, but like, they didn't realize how often they went, hey, Mikey, how'd we do that? Where'd we get this from? Like, he just,
Okay, so it's supposed to go.
Including like corners and intersections and like what's under that thing.
Yeah.
I sit in on all the meetings and there's always a question to that. Like, what, do you remember what happened there? Why is that intersection like this?
Yeah.
You're like, oh, well.
Because this happened and this farmer said this and we had to do that.
We couldn't take down the big tree.
Yeah.
Next will be the Public Works team, but they're not scheduled to join us until 2:45, the current break. So I figure if everyone's okay, I can do a couple more of the smaller, more internal budgets. Now that I'm a little better prepared and I mark my pages so I can go right to them. If you go to page 92, this is a really easy one.
And what tab we got?
Dispatch.
Dispatch. Alright, is everybody there? Okay, so. Okay, so dispatch, 10-48. This is what we pay our share of YCOM. We get the amount from YCOM, we budget for it, this is strictly discretionary. They're still going through their budget process, but this is our share for paying for the sheriff's office and the county's portion for being a member of YCOM, which all the local law enforcement and fire, both city and, and counties all pay into YCOM to support their operations. So it's basically the 911 center.
Which is 713,042 according to the discretionary table.
Yeah, we adjust.
Yeah.
Any questions on that one? This one's pretty straightforward. We usually end up having to adjust it just a little bit, but it's pretty small once we get through the budget process with YCOM. The next one, I'll have you go to that one. Page 98.
I'm school.
The one thing I forgot to acknowledge during my presentation, in years past, typically, I need to highlight that I have a budget team that is kind of, that we parse up different sections of this budget. And typically they'd be in the room, and that's Mike Barnhart, who's our finance director, Jennifer Elkins, who's our assistant finance manager, and Justin Hogue, who is our business services director and also serves as my deputy. Those three are usually in the room going over some of these budgets, and they're, just know that they're sitting in the conference room over at the White House and watching the video and taking notes, because a lot of the changes, it's a team app, in getting this done. And I forgot to recognize that all the work that they put on this, and normally they'd be here in the room, but they're not. And so Fund 15, County Schools, this is a fund that usually Mike Barnhart would be doing the presentation for. It's pretty straightforward. We're a pass-through, that these funds, this is SRS payments, it comes to the county and goes right out to the schools. We budget 85,000 just to make sure that we have sufficient appropriation authority to distribute those out, but it's really up in the air what that actual amount ends up being from year to year. You can see in some of the prior year actuals, it's right around 40,000, but that can change, and so we just want to make sure we have sufficient authority for passing through these funds. Any questions on county schools?
Yeah, that's the one I feel like in the budget that I explained to the most people. Because they asked me, what's the county school?
Let's see, if we go to page 129, and it's going to have the non-departmental tab. find it okay. So 1039, non-departmental. It's all general fund that comes in here. We call this non-departmental because all of the charges that are in here are not necessarily attributed to one single department within Fund 10. It's all of them. It's kind of a general category, and you can see where we'll have the professional services line. That's for the bypass lobbyists and the work that goes on there. The Newburgh bypass, and that's a pass through because we actually send invoices to the other cities that are members of this. This amount reflects that amount, and you'll see up in the revenue line next to Newburgh bypass, the funds are received, and then we pay that out for the Newburgh Dundee bypass lobbyists. And then once you start getting down, you'll see the largest portions of this budget. We have the medical examiner. That's one that is a challenge. It's something that the county pays for. We're responsible for the medical examiner, and we pay for it through here. It's general fund, and we just pay for it out of non-departmental. We do from time to time in the past, there's times that discretionary funds are awarded as grants, and we'll pay that out of 1039. But really the main portion of 1039 when you get into this is the property and liability insurance. And you'll see the liability insurance for $462,000 and the property insurance for $151,000. This is what pays for all the Fund 10 general fund departments, their share of those insurance premiums. So we do a payment to Fund 80 out of this. The other non-general fund departments like HHS, Department of Community Justice, Public Works, they also are billed similar, not this amount, not this much, but they pay directly into Fund 80. But this is the majority share of paying those premiums from year to year because Fund 10 is one of our larger, together it's one of our larger departments that pays the whole thing.
And again, it comes just like for Rick John, not Rick Wilson. It comes the non-departmental, like discretionary allocations on this table, and then it's reflected. You just can't see it, the money that comes into it. It took me a while to figure out, so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Again, that's where I go back to this balances the 1002. So you see $126,000 in revenue, $863,000 in expense. So how does this balance? It balances the 1002. Any questions on non-departmental? All right, if you want to turn the page to page 130. These are federal funds, Title III. There's a lot of restrictions associated to the use of Title III funds that can really be used for just a couple options: fire-wise, education, search and rescue operations on federal lands, and that's pretty much it. So we don't necessarily, in fact, we haven't received anything yet this year that may change. We budget $10,000 in there just in case we get something, but and we hold grant funds available in case there's a proposal that comes to the Board of Commissioners during the budget year. We keep everything in the expense line, but there's really not much to this budget. We haven't seen a lot of revenues coming in, and we haven't had any requests in quite some time. It's been a few years.
There was a proposal to do a fire, training, fire suppression on your own property, and like a training and workshop, and that was postponed. And there was going to be a request through this, but it was postponed because of the pandemic.
Again, these are federal funds, very strict on what we can use, and so a lot of times we get a lot of questions about, oh, will it fund this? And I have to be Debbie Downer and say, no, these are the federal, restrictions on what we can use.
Yeah.
So, Any questions on Title III funds?
And this is the one that was in the Oregonian for other counties. So thanks for being the.
If you want to turn the page to page 131. Now, this one's a little bit different. These are federal funds. These are ONC reserve funds. However, this doesn't have the strings attached to it that Title III funds or even Title II funds, which we don't have built in to our budget. But these are discretionary. Again, it all depends if we're going to get any funds. You know, we've gotten year to date, we've gotten 103,000, and then we have some pool and bond interest that's come in there. So really what you see is a modified beginning balance. Originally, when we did the version 10, we actually reduced the beginning balance because this was the fund that Lindsay, you had asked about for the 250,000 for the small business grants that went out. It was this fund right here. And so, and we just approved another request for 50, so we may need to adjust this beginning balance down again one more time, depending on if the funds get spent out of that. But again, this is for one-time grant awards. It's funds that are available through the year. We typically hold most of these funds and other expense, and then the board has the ability during the budget year, if a request or a project comes forward, they can fund it from these OPC funds. Much like they did with the small business grant.
And last year, this was the funds that we transferred to HHS for a family place. You know this one too. So that's the 150,000 transfer.
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Any questions on federal funds? Then on that note, I know that we have a break here. Does everyone want to take a break, or do we want to keep going until Mark Lago signs it?
Got 8 minutes. I bet you can get a couple more. But chair.
Up to the chair.
All right, let's keep going.
Okay.
Keep going.
Great.
I'm trying to stick to some of the smaller ones that are, I can do in 5 minutes. All right, I don't know if I can do this one in 5 minutes, but if you turn to page 97, which is the Economic Development Fund. All right, is everybody ready?
Some of our books are out of order, so
Uh-oh.
Why don't you tell us what tab it's on your TC?
Economic Development.
Yeah, the purple.
well, do you have your?
It should be, I know I'm bouncing around.
Yeah.
Tabs don't-
It should be in the Community Services section. And right next to Mediation, Law Library, Transit.
Got a few pages that are out of order. Denny and I both found them, but
Yeah,
we're on the same,
we'll work.
we're on the same pattern, so,
They're not the same page.
but not the same page.
All right. Are you still recording?
Yeah, it's, which one we're in? Because you had the same
Yeah.
thing
This
that
one
I
must
did.
be right.
What we're, okay, see, because I've got, these are out of order. See,
See, that's all criminal justice.
and it goes right to
It
8 and
goes.
18. Oh, there we go.
It might take more than 5
Okay.
minutes. I've got a couple
Thank you.
questions already. Like, I want to know which memberships, association memberships are paying out of this compared to the other one that we looked at recently, which was, I think, internal department or something, because that one also had association memberships.
Yeah, at a 1039.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. How are those different?
They're different because the ones that are funded in Fund 26 are specific to economic development. So
That's what I
the
thought.
ones that are in Fund 26 are going to be a portion of the AOC dues that's specific to economic development. It's going to be set core.
Okay.
And then there's the chamber, where they're separate.
Right, and then the
Separate
chambers are in here. 1039 is going to have AOC and COG are those memberships are paid for at a 1039.
Great, that's what I was hoping.
All right.
Thanks.
So economic development, you'll see beginning balance. This is one that last year we deliberately did not, we tried to hold some funds in reserve. We didn't put everything into the grant program for the current year. So what you see in the beginning balance is what we have remaining to carry forward. But then I would highlight the EDA beginning balance at 201,000. That's part of a revolving loan program that's administered by COG, and it has a lot of strings attached to it. We don't see a lot of people using it. We've been carrying this on the books. It was part of the community development block grant loan program that goes back to the 1980s. That we've been carrying in here. We don't see a lot of people accessing it because of the interest rates. You can get better interest rates.
Interest rate, but red tape, compliance issues.
Right.
Is there a way to clean that off of here or change something to where
We got it. We have the funds. We have to, the 201,000 was given to us, and even if there's no way for it to ever come out of the budget, because even if we loaned out the full amount, then we'll start getting
Getting it back.
payments back.
Well, I just
in
mean
for-
the structure, the requirements that go with it. Is there any way to make that an
No,
actually usable?
We're having
County's in
those
the state,
conversations.
Working on that to figure out how we can free up. We're not the only county that has, a lot of counties have it.
Yeah.
How we can free up that money and use it,
Yeah.
because right now you just can't use it.
Right.
Okay.
So there's a
So they're
lot of
working on it.
conversations that are happening around that. I know SEDCOR and COG both are having conversations with the federal, The line, video lottery, the 300,000 that we put there, that is very optimistic. I think in years past, you can see some of the year-to-date actuals, we've actually come in, just over 300,000. But it depends on how prolonged, things are closed down, and I'll know more on May 20th. This is going to be one of those, and I'm also going to be curious to see what the lottery's forecasting for earnings, because the longer that staying closed, we're not going to see the revenues.
Well, and I think it's just not the revenue. One of the things that is in front of the lottery commission now is to actually, since they're not getting revenue off the machines, is to go back and start charging all the people that have machines. I think it was $385 per machine. So if you have 6 machines, they want you to start renting the machines, because they're not making any money off the machines either, so.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, they don't have the money,
They don't have the money.
they don't have
to
the
do it.
patrons to do it, so
So they
that's,
want to rent on the machines.
So this is a placeholder. I don't know what the amounts are going to look like but at the same time, when we get down below into the materials and services, we have some challenges associated with this fund, and this probably wasn't the right one for me to pick before we go with Public Works about to join. Because I would just highlight, I'll have more information. This is one of the funds that I'm watching really closely, because if you look at, you take out the revolving loan, the 201,000, and the expenses funded down below are basically being funded by the beginning balance and what we receive for video lottery. The beginning balance, if we continue to spend that down, then we're going to be relying on the video lottery, and those, it doesn't pencil out. And the line item, professional services, there's a couple things that are funded here. One portion of it is for SEDCOR, our contract with SEDCOR, who provides economic development services for us. And then the other portion, it pays the county share of the Newburgh bypass losses as well. So that's what's in that 186,808. You go further down, I did still budget $200,000 for grants in this budget. Last year we had $250,000 available for the 3 different grant categories, and it was a very successful. It seemed like it went really well. SEDCOR set up a great grant program, and it seems like we did a lot of good work with those funds. But I do have some questions about whether or not that $200,000 is going to be available, or should it be available. I have it built into the budget for right now, and that would be more of a policy decision. If we keep it in the expenditure line, it would be a policy decision by the Board of Commissioners during the next year. So I'm recommending that we keep it in there, but if the revenues come in less, we will either have to make some decisions on SEDCOR contract or the grant programs, or even if you get further down, you see the 90,000 that goes out to parks and fairgrounds. So we have a lot of funds that are going out of this, and not necessarily with the revenues that are coming in and supporting this. So we have some challenges associated with this fund. But
Is this only a piece of what we give SEDCOR or send to SEDCOR? Or is that
that's the full, it does, the whole contract's in there.
I think it's it's right around 90,000 of that 186.
no?
And
But
then
I mean, in
longest.
terms of the grants, you said SEDCOR handled the $250,000 grants.
We had $250,000 budgeted for this year that was divvied out, that SEDCOR
Managed.
managed on behalf of the board.
But is that all they do, or is there more that we do with them?
They do a lot more under the contract: outreach, retention. They do business recruitment, workforce management. I made point to the liaison to economic development to help me with some of that. But yeah, they provide quite a bit of services out of here that we haven't necessarily provided in a number of years. We don't have an economic development person who's funded out of this, so we work with SEDCOR to do that.
Yeah, and I think one of the things with SEDCOR is that, number one, it gives us the commission in the county a greater feel of the citizens' transparency, because we're not picking the favorites of who gets the grants and who doesn't get the grants. That's what we've done by a grant committee that is appointed by volunteers from the Yamhill County that are actually, they form the committee, the Economic Development Advisory Committee. So basically, we say, here's 250,000, you guys do your thing.
And we also approve the program.
I'm just thinking, we've got 200,000 in grants budgeted. If lottery just completely tanks and we only get a third of that, then we're potentially looking at no grant money.
That would be one possibility.
And even under that scenario, you're getting pretty close to spending down your reserve, your beginning balance.
Yeah, and I
But
think
I
that
can
was
see
what
the
Ann was
possibility that
alluded to.
for a year or two, we're maintaining a SEDCOR contract the way we did in a year or two, that for a year or two, we may not give anything away in grants.
Like last year.
Oh,
We
yeah, the
didn't-
previous year. That's right.
Yeah, we haven't given any grants out.
Last year, we didn't give any.
In 2018.
2018, 19.
And how long have we been contracting with SEDCOR?
Just 2 years? Is it 2 years? 2, 3?
So
I think it's 2 or 3
does
years.
the
We'll be looking
contract,
at next one minute.
does the contract with Sedcor change if they don't handle any sort of grant
No.
distribution?
We just ask them to do that as part of what they do.
I'm sorry, what was the?
Oh, we're talking about Sedcor and the grants, and we've had them for what, 3 years, or is it 3 years or 2 years? I think it's 3 years.
Sedcor?
2018.
I mean, we've
So we
worked with
just did a
them.
renewal.
Oh, well, no, but we worked with them prior to this contract, and that was 4
This
years
is our, we're currently in our second year with Sencor, I think.
of this contract.
Of
This
this
contract.
contract.
But before that, we worked with them for 4 or 5 years
We've
at
worked with
least.
Sedcor. We've been members of Sedcor for quite some time, but they weren't necessarily involved at this level
No,
that they're providing right now, and they were not. In fact, it used to be part of the budget process. We had meetings dedicated to doing economic development grants that
hmm
this group would review all the applications and go through the whole
Yes.
determination. And it was the outcome of those discussions from this committee where it was really advocated for, you know what, we should be working with like a Sedcor to help administer the programs, because then it takes, because it was another step that this budget committee would have to do, is divvying out $200,000 of grant funds to local businesses. And it was just looking at the metrics and how we do this, and that's where the Sedcor contract came from.
Yeah, they do a lot of lobbying too, I think, Lindsay, with the businesses, and not just the county, but in the cities. They do a lot of business, a lot of consulting with small companies in Carlton and Yamhill, and everything is part of their contract.
And this doesn't just, the contract, I guess I would also add, it doesn't just pay for Sedcor. It actually pays for a position that's dedicated to Yamhill County,
Mhm.
because they actually hired Abishaw as part of the contract, the RFP that we went through in the contract, because we did go through an RFP process, and then Sedcor was selected as the economic development consultant, and then they hired Abishaw, who serves in that role on behalf and for the Yamhill County.
Yeah, she's
part of
totally
that contract.
dedicated to Yamhill County.
I want to be sensitive to the time that we are in right now economically. I think that what we saw with our county grants, we had over 175 people apply, close to 200,
363.
53,
3 times
Yeah, 3 times.
the request for grants. And if we're looking at potentially not giving out a dime, and yet we're paying out quite a bit of money to administration, I just want to be sensitive to that. It feels like if Sedcor is not going to be handling grants, then I don't know, maybe we're already in the contract, we can't change it, but that's not a very good message to send, I think, right now.
But if you wanted to look into the contract about business recruitment and retention, I think that it might change, obviously, with what's going on. I mean, are we paying someone to do business recruitment and retention when really we're looking at people who can't hang on? So that might be something to revisit, but the terms of the contract are how much longer?
I don't have that.
Okay.
But I can,
It was 2 years, wasn't it?
if there's questions about
20.
that, we could, I could, maybe after the meetings, I can hold the current contract.
And look at what they do and see if that, obviously, everything's going to change going forward.
Yeah. No, I understand what they do. If there's an expectation that as part of our economic development budget, we are going to be giving these grants out and trying to help our businesses. And when we see a pullback in the budget, we pull back all of that, but we don't pull back on administrative costs. I mean, that's
That's a good point.
especially with the huge demand we're seeing.
I think for this one, this is one that I point to specifically, that when the state's revenue forecast comes out and we're seeing what they're projecting for video lottery receipts and what some of those revenues are going to look like, this would definitely be one of those prior to adoption that we're probably gonna have to dive into Fund 26 and figure out if, if based on information, it looks like that we're gonna come up short of that $300,000, we're gonna have to make some adjustments to the expenditures. But, and then we're gonna have to look at each of these categories. Do we not give out grants? Do we scale back contracts? Do we not transfer funds to parks and fairgrounds? You know,
There's
which
a lot
a
of
combination of those, or
You know,
For professional services?
yeah, it's like half lobbyist and half psych.
Okay.
I think, is that accurate?
I think it's a little bit more, it's more sacred.
More Secor. Okay, I just remember it being 96,000 for Secor, so that would put us at about 90 for the lobbyists.
Lobbyist is for the bypass?
yes, that's for the county share.
Yeah, the county share, that's right.
All right, if there's no further questions, I knew I probably picked the worst one, 5-minute filler.
No, it's a good one. You gave us some more time to just think about, so we could discuss.
You know, so I see Mr. Lago is there and probably eager to get going with this public works budget. So we're gonna wanna go to page,
Back up, right?
there will be a tab that says Public Works.
That's the one.
48. And what I'll do is, this is Fund 11, and I'll take a second and this is Mark Lago's first budget presentation. He's our new Public Works Director, and I see Russ Heath is sitting next to him, our fleet manager, and I see a water bottle.
I bet there's somebody
Catherine
else there.
as well. There's Catherine.
There's
All right.
Catherine. Well, sorry.
I have this little globe in the middle table. Oh my gosh.
Technology.
All right, back and forth.
Almost there. Okay. Modern technology.
All right, Mark, take it away.
Okay, thank you for that intro, Ken, and budget committee members. I've already been here about 7 months now, and I'm really glad to be here, and I enjoy the day-to-day challenges that are each day. It really keeps everything on the toes, and it's exciting. So the public works staff and the county staff have been great to work with, and I look forward to working with all of them for many, many years to come. With that said, I think as already said, Russ Heath is here, he's our fleet manager, and Catherine, who's our office manager. So within your binder, I have provided a memo that has 6 reclassifications. These positions have evolved over the past few years and it just needed updating. And you'll also see additional 3 public works crew members. And those 3 will be designated to the newly formed bridge group. So also in your binder is an organizational chart to get a better understanding of the operations of public works. So with that intro, is there any questions so far? Okay, move to page 47. And that is actually a proportionate share program for an intersection development for Yamhill and North Valley intersection. And there's no change there at this time. Next, we move to page 48, and that's actually motor vehicles, and Russ will be doing that presentation.
All right, the motor vehicle maintenance fund, you'll see 335.07, the state highway funds, was a slight uptick from last year. However, with the COVID-19 thing, we expect that we could see some decline as the year goes along, but that's our budget for now. 349.11 vehicle maintenance, you'll see that we ratcheted that down from 70,000 to 45, and that's just, we've had a real decline in the outside agency repairs that we do for folks outside of the county, non-county owned vehicles such as ODOT and those folks. ODOT had hired their own fleet mechanic, so New Year's coming, we hope to maybe ramp that back up again. Go into FTE, which is 5.82, and that will stay the same. However, you'll see we previously had a 405.06 service rider, and that was Gaylor Williams, who's been here for 22 years, retired. When we hired Gaylor 22 years ago, we had 7 mechanics. We're down to 3 now, so we don't feel we need a full-time parts service rider type position. What we would like to do, or propose to do, is bring back our mechanic assistant as a full-time position. Currently, we have a temporary person working in that position, and that has helped us out greatly. No other changes to our FTE. Go to materials and services on page 49. Not a lot to note on 5.01 gasoline. When we started this budget process back in December, in January, February, we were paying above $2 a gallon for unleaded. Today, we're $1.21. But it is going up tomorrow 4 cents. We'd like to leave our budget number there at 253 like we did last year. Although we don't anticipate spending all that, but that would help us offset if we do have declining revenue. The other one would be 5.02 is diesel. Today we pay 80 cents a gallon for diesel. So some big changes have come on in the last few weeks of fuel. A couple other things to note is 5307 tires. We brought that up from 25,000 to 28,000. Department equipment 543.01. We lowered it by 10,000. When we built the new shop last year, we bought some equipment for the shop, and still are, but we're bringing that number down slowly. A couple other minor things would be 6702 heat, lights, and water. We've lowered that from 18,000 to 12,000. The new facility is much more efficient than the old one. And 68310 building maintenance. We've lowered that from 25,000 to 10 due to the new building. That's pretty much it for 1129. Any questions?
Thanks, Russ.
Thanks, Russ.
Thank you,
You're
Russ.
Okay, we move on to engineering, which is on page 50. This is where we previously were talking about the retirement of Bill Bailey, county engineer. So looking at hiring a full-time project manager to take the place. And that is actually in 1155-40116. And we are on hold right now until COVID actually calms down a bit, so we can start talking to one of our lead candidates and possibly do a second interview. So that's why you also see the benefits down in line 55, let's see, 490 and all the way to 495 have gone up since last year. That's really all I have on engineering, unless any of you have any questions. Okay. Seeing none, we'll go into vote fund, page 52. So the beginning balance, I asked for a increase in the beginning balance of 170,000. And of course, I'll have to increase the appropriations of capital contract services, which is an 81102, 170 as well, which is on page 53. And that's because the public works parking lot improvements are supposed to be completed by June 30th, but they won't be until looks like August right now. So I'm trying to put a little in there to cover any costs that come in the month of June, and then pick up the second half of the project in the proposed budget year. Hence, that's why there's the adjustment. You go to 1160-335.07, that's state highway funds. That's our gas tax. And right now, anticipating revenues being down because of the COVID situation. According to ODOT's April report, we could see an estimate of approximately $600,000 shortfall in that fund. I feel confident that we'll be able to handle that shortfall because we have one of our MIP projects is actually put on hold this year because ODOT needs to keep a bridge open for a detour that they're doing. So we're pretty good to build, absorb that cost, and I haven't thrown anything into the capital improvement projects to additional because I just don't know what the situation will bring because of the gas tax revenue being down. Next in 40113 through 403.25, positions to reclassification, which is in your memo. Community binder. I also want to point out 403, 125, community service supervisor will become the vegetation management coordinator, and community service supervisor will actually be supported by community justice. And this fund will pay for the FET, and you'll see that out number on page 54, line 780.68. So moving on, you'll also see through 40514 through 40524 an additional medium utility and heavy equipment operator, we increased by 1. I do want to point out that the FTEs that are in the budget right there at the bottom of the page, you see 5, 4, and 6. Those are actually incorrect. Those should be actually 5, 6, 5. Those are increased in the budget year during budget authority by and approved by the board. So
Yeah, Mark, if Catherine can send an email, those corrections to Mike Barnhart, that'd be great.
I'll do that. Okay, and those 3 additional crew workers will actually be assigned to the bridge crew. And that's why if you turn to the next page, 54, excuse me, and you go to line 51505, you'll see increase in appropriation for bridge material. That's because we're going to go into the needed repairs we need to put into the bridges. Staying on the same page, going down to 61001 under professional services. There's a new program we're going to have here, Public Works. It's capital asset pavement systems. This is basically a road pavement management system. What this company will do is they'll evaluate all the county roads in their current status, come with a 5-year plan, using pavement condition, the traffic use and available funds, and they'll put a packet together which will go to the Road Improvement Advisory Committee and the board for approval. Before that is actually put into place. Any questions so far?
Mark, it's Mary. I just, a quick question about that. In the past, it's been something that's been done internally for historically, correct? That assessment.
Yes, correct.
Assessment. So as far as manpower and the ability and the capacity to continue doing that as opposed to or compared with paying, sort of outsourcing that, is there an underlying reason that we all of a sudden don't have the capacity to continue that?
Great question.
Okay, I think your question was pretty much, in the past, our road supervisors have picked which roads are going to be improved. Is that correct?
And then RIAC was an integral part of that, obviously part of the process, but I'm talking about initially with Public Works weighing in on that, the assessments that were done internally before they went to RIAC or in conjunction with RIAC.
Mark, she's talking about when there used to be somebody on staff who did the pavement assessment.
Oh, okay.
I think that's what you're talking. I'm pretty sure.
It's been many years since that has happened.
About 10 years since we've actually done a true pavement condition inspection.
But in,
If maybe I can help a little bit, I know a little, because I know it's probably hard for them to hear, or I think some of the issues that we've had before is the decisions that have been made on pavement have been more maybe field observation or complaint driven.
Mm-hmm.
And what this program is going to do is actually bring data and indexing into assessments of the roads to determine on whether or not, instead of just kind of relying on, well, observations or we're getting complaints of potholes,
Mm-hmm.
this is actually going to go out and do an assessment of all the roads, and then it'll be more data-driven decisions that help dictate what the MIP list is going to look like for year to year. And then also come up with a plan that if this has been paved, so at what point do we need to come back in and crack seal, or the other terms, I'm going to let Mark get more technical than that. That's as far as I can go. But it's, in talking to Mark, this is kind of like how we do master plans in certain areas to where we have an index and a data helps drive the decisions on where we need to direct that paving or that work needs to occur, instead of relying on complaints or just experience or observations, which at times can result in debates on why this road and not this road. And at least this is you have data to support that decision. Did I summarize that well, Mark?
It certainly did, and thank you.
I have a question on that, Mark and Ken. Is that, I think it was a couple of years ago, we did it on a pilot project where we mounted the road condition analyzers on the bumpers of our, like of a couple of our trucks. And they go out and they use ultrasound and everything else and radar, and they bump off and they can come back with all the numbers and the conditions of the road. Is anybody else in the Oregon, as far as the road program, the county road program using that? Do you know, Mark?
I don't know about anybody actually using that here in public works.
Not here, but what about other jurisdictions? Right, is that what your question,
yeah.
Commissioner?
There has been, yes, and we'll probably use that on one of our MIT projects, exit for Moon Valley Road there, because we do have some areas of settlement. They'll probably bring in something like that. The company that the capital asset payment management systems do, I think, 92 to 90% of all the counties and cities in the state of Oregon. So it's a program that's well established. But some of the things you're saying, Commissioner, yes, we could probably use some of those to identify some soft spots and some voids in the roads.
Okay, thanks, Mark.
I just
Thank
want
you.
to make sure that Commissioner Starrett, that, did we answer your question?
Yes and no. And I just wanted to go back to that because I'm just trying to think. So over the last, let's say, 5 years of my experience here is that we didn't have this program, and we of course get complaint driven, and we get the observation, so the anecdotal, what needs to be repaired. So I was just trying to ascertain whether or not this is something that, do we see this overriding need because we have let roads go that typically needed to be done that we haven't kept up with? I mean, I know we've got a long list of roads. We'll never, ever get to paving them or in terms of perfect maintenance. But I guess I was just questioning whether or not we've survived doing it this way. Not that it's just a bad thing. I was just wondering about the cost, the ratio to what we're doing and what we will be doing.
Well, there'll actually be, again, a 5-year plan that will be laid out through GIS. It'll be very transparent. If we ever wanted to go for a bond, we'd be able to use that as well, to show calculations of how much we're going to be needing for these roads. There is a lot within the state management system that uses preventive maintenance. So you actually put a portion of the budget towards roads that are good and keeping them good while you build up other roads. I've used this system at the city of Good River for many years, and I'm very confident in where it is. I was really surprised that Yamhill County didn't have that. According to Bill Gilly, here's a person with great knowledge again, they tried to do something like this about 20 years ago, and then again about 6 years ago. Without any, didn't go through. Bill Gilly actually started this with the company from Marion County personnel. way back 25 years ago. And it's just a way to look at your pavement index with your traffic volumes, your increased growth. And here, basically, we go around and say, I think this road needs to be done, or like Ken just said, it's complaint driven, or where we think we need improvements to be. It's also a very good way to forecast budgeting as well.
Okay, makes
If I
sense.
may, it takes discretion out of the decision, and as Ken said, it makes it very consistently and reliably data-driven.
Thank you.
And I guess I should probably note, I think this is a really good question. And the public works staff have talked about it a lot, but there will still be the steps of presenting to RIAC, discussing within public works, and then presenting to us too. I just want to make that note that
Sure.
it's not entirely, this is how we do it.
Right.
That's based upon my understanding. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Catherine.
Good. So going to page 54, the motor pool, that's 780.05. And we're going to continue with our grader replacement program, new crew truck, the used AP loader, and a utility and bridge trailer. Any questions on fleet? Russ is here to answer any questions. Okay, seeing none. We'll stick on the same page. We'll go down to contract service, capital contract services, 81102. And this is for public contracts for public improvements. So this is basically our maintenance improvement project list. This year's list was approved through agreed upon by the Road Improvement Advisory Committee, as well as approved by the board in their April 23rd meeting. All the projects on this list, again, will be done by the contracted engineer or contracted contractor. The MIP list does look a lot different than previous years. This is due to more emphasis put on repair and replacement of our bridges, not just our roads. And Kenny has fallen behind on the bridge work. I think this year's list is a good first step to get us going in the right direction. The next line below that is 82101, capital professional services. That's for all the engineering design, all those MIPs that are in the current list. Going on page 55 now. We have the bike path, which is 83014. The project this year will be Old Sheridan Road from Highway 18 to the city limits, just past Beeline Road. And funds for that are exactly 1% of the gas tax that the county receives. I know I think was a lot there in 1160. Any questions? Okay. Now the next one, of course, is the bike path, which is on page 56. And again, you'll see the 247, that's actually that 1% gas tax that goes into the bike path fund. Questions on the bike path? Fine. All right. And the next one is actually motor vehicles, page 57, and I'll put that in your hand there.
Fund 45 motor vehicle replacement fund. 301.01, you see our beginning balance is down from last year considerably. That's due to a $250,000 loan to the jail security cameras, Fund 17. And you'll see through 301.02 through 301.79, those are all reserve funds, funds that we reserve for investment purposes. There be a little better interest on those things. Go ahead. Rest of things are pretty in tune with what they were last year for revenue. No real changes in materials and services. we'll get down to 800 in capital, 0.81. You can see there's $148,000. We have 2 motor graders that are coming up due for replacement this fall. So we'll be looking at those and deciding how we want to deal with that. Currently, we're running the Caterpillar 140 M3 graders with a 2-year replacement, and it's worked out very well. The buyback is very good. So we hope to continue that program, but we'll see what the numbers look like this fall. And you can also see there in 990.05, that's where we reserve money for our fuel island. We're at the end of next year, we'll be at $250,000 on the fuel island reserve. At some point, we'll decide, how much money do we need to cap that at? Do we need more than $250,000? Maybe. That money is generated by Public Works contributes $17,000 a year, and then the motor pool for each mile that vehicles drive, that's all sheriff's fleet, the whole county fleet contributes 1 or 1.5 cents per mile. That's where the funds are generated for that. And then that's it for motor pool. Any questions?
Okay, then we'll turn to page 58. I'd like to say the beginning balance is a little higher, that's because there was no public works director for a portion of the year. I also want to bring you down to line 335.7. That actually is state gas tax put in here, but there's a set amount of 31,286. It's always out of the HCP plan, and then we just add a CPI number onto that, so that's where you get to 32,225. I also want to point out at the bottom of the page, 99.03 is a reserve fund for when Fish and Wildlife actually stop helping the county with Dr. Hammond's blue butterfly inventory, which if you go up to line 699.01, where it says other expense, that pays for the Dr. Hammond inventory. And we obviously get help from Fish and Wildlife. So anticipating in the future that's going to stop. So I'm trying to develop some kind of fund there to take this. And any questions on the habitat conservation budget?
And I would just add just a little background on this one. The Habitat Conservation Fund was a result of a lawsuit that came down about the Endangered Species Act in response to the fender blue butterfly and the Kincaid's lupin, which is the sole food source for this butterfly. So that's what this fund was set up for, is to manage for the Kincaid lupin populations that occur within county right-of-ways. And then also you'll see a portion of the division manager that's in this budget is Jared, the parks manager, because there's mitigation sites out at the Deer Creek Park site that includes a population of Kincaid's lupin. So they use that for one, management activities for any areas that are identified as critical habitat for the Kincaid's lupin, and then also to pay for Dr. Hammond to come out and do the butterfly surveys and make sure we're compliant with our permit that was issued, because there's a certain, it allows us to, Public Works, to do maintenance activities in the right of way as long as we're adhering to and protecting conservation areas. So that's what this whole fund was set up to do, is compliance with the Endangered Species Act.
Just as a little side for people, maybe one person in here that doesn't know about the Fender's blue butterfly is named after a McMinnville resident. He used to be a professor at Linfield College, Bill Fender. And he was the one that started the fight for the Fender's blue butterflies. So it's all over the Northwest now. That it was named after a guy.
All right, you know that guy?
Oh,
All right, so I just
Yeah,
wanted to
great
share a little bit
background.
of background
Yeah.
on what this fund's
Good
about.
background.
All right, did you have anything more to add, Mark, for Public Works?
I do not.
Does anybody have any questions?
No, great presentation,
Thank-
Mark, Catherine, and
thank you.
Russ. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys. I'd just like to say thank you guys for everything you've done with this COVID-19 thing. I think you guys do a great job on that. Keep it up.
But I think you guys have too. So back at you.
Thank you.
All right. Oh, I think I was supposed to have.
Yeah, is Justin going to join us now? Okay.
Was Justin gonna join us via Teams? Because I'm not seeing that. Seeing it playing, so. While you're checking on that, I'll keep us on a look, unless we want to take a break.
5 minutes maybe?
Up to the chair.
Are you going to take a 5-minute break?
Okay.
All right. Stay recess for 5 minutes?
Yeah. Here you go. Oh, no, I'll do it. No, I'll do it.
When in doubt, just call
Yeah,
him.
so disregard the email. Tell Carrie to disregard the email, just put it on the screen. Yeah, I'll run through these. All right, later. I will slow down. Slow down these budgets.
Don't do that.
Sorry to join ourselves here.
Totally.
I'm really happy to see some of the lines in the commissioner page, some of the numbers, the year-to-dates. Like travel expenses, discretionary.
So Rick, what are you gonna do with all your time off now?
Probably go up to Wash, spend more time with the grandkids. Probably go to Minnesota, spend some time in Minnesota. First thing, we'll go spend some time in Hawaii again. Haven't been over there for about 4 years.
That's rough.
What?
That's rough.
Well, it's-
Somebody's gotta do
We
it.
tried to go like every other year, but it just got so expensive to go over there.
Now you could go over there on a nickel.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Any room in the house you could probably get.
That's right, so, and then we took, my wife is redoing the house. We've got 4 of our 9 rooms are painted now. And I take things down, patch holes and everything, she paints because I'm not a painter, then I put things back up, so.
Sounds like a
We're
pretty
gonna do
good
that, and then we're re-landscaping gonna re-landscape our backyard, we're putting a new retaining wall, and we have kind of a low spot, water settles in.
Where do you live?
What,
Where do
we're
you-
on off of Alexandria and Louise. My wife manages, for us, she manages Kathleen Manor.
Oh, okay.
So she's 228 units in there. And so we manage that, or she manages.
That's a lot. Well, Mike Keys finally came off the Oregon Mutual Board. He retired.
Is he back in Wisconsin full time now? Are they still
No,
here?
I think he'll spend a fair amount of time still here. But
Still here? Yeah, I was wondering when he's gonna get off.
yeah, he aged out in March.
Yes, is he still on Seawater Night Board? Do you
I
remember?
think he is. Yeah, I think he is.
Yeah, boy, it's hard to believe. I remember when he first came to Oregon Mutual.
Actually, I was the one that first met him.
That's
Because-
right, that's right, when he came to Hagen Hamilton.
He came to manage our
Hagen
company,
Hamilton, yeah, I remember that.
1983 or 84.
God, it's been that long. 26 years. That's right, because I forgot he went to Hagen Hamilton, you guys went to.
Yeah, he was my manager.
That's right. Get that. I really, it's funny, Mike and Connie, I love them dearly. I've never, if somebody would have told me that Mike would have spent 25 years here, 30 years, in this area, he just didn't strike me as the kind of guy that was a small town, but then where you look at where he lives in Wisconsin, where his house is in Wisconsin, small town.
Right. Danny, what do you do? I forgot. What do you do for a living? What do you do for a living?
I own some small businesses and buildings, real estate.
Is that on 3rd Street, I think? Is that what I was
Yeah, I mean, we have some buildings, the Douglas where the Thai country is.
Okay.
And then,
One of my favorite restaurants.
yeah, they're open today, first
Are they
time back.
really? Congratulations.
So that's about time. So,
Wow.
well, they're not, I mean, they're open for,
You mean you can
Takeout.
go get takeout now and
Yeah,
stuff there?
yeah.
Oh,
Note to self.
They will do
yeah, so
well.
that's
back, huh?
our entire, yeah, it's
Oh, man.
mainly due to my kids texting them and telling them this is ridiculous.
Right.
Because I think
I'm sure
my
you got a
kids
few
eat
other
there
texts.
more than,
I mean, spicy chicken eggplant, like the spicy eggplant dish is like one of the most amazing things. in the world.
I don't
you
even know what it
said
is.
it's regular-
I know it's 38. Other than that, I know it's a sweet
Number
chili vegetable mix with shrimp and
I just
it's
have them
amazing.
shrimp.
Number 38. Okay.
I think it's
so now,
38 or 32. It's
Well, that's
sweet
that's
chili.
great news to hear.
Yeah,
Spicy eggplant.
Yeah, so they're
that's
back
all
to
mine.
I'll be sure to let the office know.
yeah. So,
Yeah, 3rd Street's pretty much a ghost town.
it's, yeah, we have some, other than, there are some RV parks, which are the only thing that's sustaining right now. The RV parks are doing okay, but everything else is, yeah. Union Block, Yoke, they're all ghost towns.
Mm.
Yeah.
I've never driven down 3rd Street where I could park anywhere I wanted, anytime.
I was on the phone with someone the other day and I was standing, it was like 6:30. I just was standing in the middle of the intersection right there by, like literally, and I looked all directions and there was 2 cars.
Yeah.
Like,
You know,
wait,
it's just.
and it was a nice day. It wasn't even, I mean, I was just standing.
There's a lot of construction getting done though. I've noticed
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Lowe's, it looks like it's Christmas. They're
That-
packed to the.
Honestly,
gills.
that's what I told him, a friend of mine, I said, it feels like when you come downtown on Thanksgiving or
Yeah.
Christmas
Yeah.
Day, and there's just
Mm.
no one around.
Right.
That's what I told him on the
Yeah.
phone. I was like, that's what I was saying in the middle of the
Yeah.
intersection. So it was like it's
I still can't
Christmas.
figure out what the one city police car does parking down there 24 hours a day, but it's always.
It's really just to have
let people
some
know there's a car
deterrence.
down there.
Yeah, I think they figure it out after it's,
Panopticon.
after it's
Because
been.
nobody's around.
No, no.
It's just-
they
Like the one in Carlton,
Yeah, they-
the one they park in Carlton,
The
which
one in Carlton gets me every time.
they don't even have a police force. They just have a car.
Yeah.
But it does stop you. That visual enforcement is very powerful.
Well, I hope that they unleash capitalism again and get back.
I'm hoping so, yeah. But I know that there's a lot of vandalism going on
Is there?
Oh,
downtown.
yeah, downtown.
I mean, they just broke Ben Franklin's glasses again.
Hmm.
I don't know who's doing that. It's like the third time. Our building, I mean, I got video just the other day. We came back and all of our planters were just thrown everywhere. We have the girl who did it on video. There's nothing they're going to do to her.
Nope.
She's one of the homeless. I don't even know if she's homeless. She's just,
Just
I know
has
some mental
stroller-
issues.
stroller and dolls.
No, not that one.
Are we ready to
Are
come
we
back?
ready?
I'm
Oh,
ready.
we're ready.
Yeah.
All right, let's call to order.
All right, so the next couple budgets, I'll be presenting a few more. And the first one that I'll go over, if you go to page 108, is the commissioner's budget. All right, so this Fund 1013, this budget, this is for the Board of Commissioners office. You can see that for quite some time, we've been running a pretty good beginning balance here. And the other revenue outside of general fund revenue, there's the admin overhead revenue that's charged out to non-general fund departments. So there's an admin fee that goes out to help support this fund. Down in the personnel, you have the 3 commissioners, and then you have the office staff who have been working really hard. And this whole week, you'll see Carrie quite a bit, and of course with Carolina here. So not a lot of changes, no substantial changes when it comes to the personnel portion. You get down into materials and services. This is all pretty straightforward. Not a lot of major changes that have been built into this. You know, it's one line that we could probably take a closer look at is the travel expense. You know, historically, you know, we had some, you know, we may want to adjust that, but we pretty much built this budget as a status quo budget. If you would like those numbers adjusted, we can do that and either put it in another line or move it to the balance.
I'm happy to do that. I'm pleased to see the year-to-date, and I don't think it's going to be necessary to have that expense authority.
Are you looking at the 25,000?
Yes.
Yeah. I will say the only, you know, I saw you didn't hear there's an election that's coming up, and sometimes we do hold funds a little bit extra because depending on the outcome of the election and whoever's coming into office, they'll be coming in budget. And so if there's expenses or anything associated with the office or needed to do some things, we try to hold some funds in here. So even though it's in the travel line, it gives this fund a little bit more expenditure authority. I'm not saying, you know, $15,000 or $20,000. It's probably, that's not what I'm talking about, but we could make that change and drop the fund. I mean, the year-to-date actual is right around 5,000. You know, one thought would be is maybe take it down to like 8,000 and then put the balance into the ending balance. If, you know, it's something I could make that change for and then put it on the list and you as a committee can deliberate on that if you want to, or if there's just consensus if you want to, we can just make happen.
That
You know,
makes
one
sense.
thing that I've always been for since I was elected, Ken, is that I would like to see, you know, definitely the travel expenses too much. I mean, you know, split And then that and the commissioner discretionary, which is $1,500 a piece. I'd like to be able to track that by, if we take that $1,500 a piece and put each one, because I don't know that if, let's say, Mary's spending something where I compare to the other two commissioners, because it just all comes out of one.
All you have to do is ask Carrie. We do
Oh, she
track
know
that.
I asked her.
Do track
And
it.
what you don't see in this budget, because of the budget document, we don't display what we call project codes. And each commissioner is set up on a project code. So when I run this report in Fiscal Focus, or what we call a stadium report, I can see the project codes and who spent what.
Okay, that's fine, as long as you track it.
$1,500. So it is tracked, and Carrie Hinton also tracks that.
But it's
So-
available on Fiscal Focus.
One of the things, Commissioner, that I had asked several years ago was that, that we have some parameters around that discretionary, because I've chosen not to use my discretionary, saving it for a big project. I was thinking drop-in center or something like that. So I thought that there should be some parameters around what the commissioners should be using the discretionary for. And I was in the minority in that, and so it never got anywhere. But I don't want it to be one of those things where it's a slush fund, and I don't mean that that money is spent inappropriately, but what is the whole purpose of this years ago was back when the commissioners were given, $5,000 to use toward their liaison duties for a project that was couldn't be completed within the budget. And then it got down to the $1,500 per commissioner, and it's been used for a variety of different things. And some of the stuff, frankly, in my opinion, that it's been used for is really not defensible. But that was a vote of the board on another thing outside of the budget process, to say, by policy, what is this money supposed to be used for?
I agree with you guys. I know the last couple of years, whatever I use out of mine, I never use it down to zero. It's all gone to a program that the county's a part of, or the county supports, like Juliet's House, Henderson House, the diaper program, it's always gone towards those kind of programs. That's all I've spent money. I agree with you 100%. I think it should be identified if this is what that money can be spent for.
I'm happy to go with that. I think it would be really good to
Yeah.
establish parameters, and that would probably be a three of us at a separate, I'm guessing.
Right.
Yeah.
Policy,
But let's do that.
yeah.
Not part of this budget, again, but other than that, I think we need to see what we spend it for on the revenue side. On the expense side, have some guidelines around that and what that money can be spent for.
And the other thing I wanted to, but this might be another one of the items for us to consider in terms of policy, is that the commissioners' travel expenses be in line with what other departments their requirements are, because I think it's pretty fast and loose what the electeds can do with as far as travel and those types of things. I'd like to see ours line up with other departments, because they have some strict parameters on how far they can go and when they can spend the night. And I think it's only fair that we line up with that too. And right now it doesn't. So maybe we could put that on
I don't have
the long list of
discuss. I have-
things we should be talking about.
Let's, I mean, I would like to do that too. So that could probably be part of this, of a similar, put it on there as the same conversation.
So in terms of the dollar amount though, do you anticipate having, I know COVID travel is slow right now, but do you anticipate having to potentially travel more after we reopen for federal,
I don't
visiting our
anticipate-
federal
that's a good question,
delegation or whatever?
So for the last 4 years, I have not put in for mileage when I've gone anywhere. And I think a lot of this, chunks of it come from when a commissioner goes to, say, we have to go to a lobbying thing in DC or something like that. But then also there's the travel back and forth to Salem and wherever else. So that's what this is pretty much reflective of.
Yeah. Maybe sorry?
AOC conference.
The
AOC
AOC conference. That was the
conference
one I
at
was thinking of,
Eugene,
yeah. Yeah.
So it's pretty much every year we have the same types of trips for the most part.
Depends on the commissioner. So if the
Yeah,
commissioners
that's what I was
want
just
to
thinking.
adopt some policies, because again, we're looking at the budget, we're looking at this point, we're looking at the budget, looking at the parameters and what's built in the budget and coming out of the recommendation. I think if there's any other further policies that you want to build in or further controls, I think that's a board discussion and policy decision that is made by the board.
Yeah, I
Right.
think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Especially since I couldn't figure out what all the parameters were, and then
There aren't any.
suddenly
Whee!
discovered.
Where do you want to go? Here's blank check.
All right.
And I work well with parameters, so I like those. So I appreciate you bringing it up.
So usually 1013 is pretty straightforward, but there was a lot of great discussions. So any questions on 1013? Any other further?
It's great. My two things have been covered. No more.
And again, when you get back, you'll still see that we still have a pretty good budget and balance there for 160,000. So let's see, the next budget that we'll go to is administrative services. And that budget will start on page 126. I guess before I get into that, there's a couple of requests, but I see that I'm missing one memo. So Mike Barnhart needs to get me his memo. I know he's watching right now.
This is so handy.
There's two requests going into 1010. 1010 is administrative services. This covers human resources, administration, the accounting office, special projects are all included in Fund 1010. We have one request. You'll see a memorandum that's in here from Justin, and this is both a general fund request and an additional FTE request. In light, we do this before the pandemic. It's becoming even more clear with what our human resources office is going through in processing all the various leave requests and the workload that's hitting human resources. We need to add another position to HR to support our staff. A lot of the information that we're getting from SHRM or industry standards, typically you have one HR specialist for every, I think it's 80 employees. And I think right now we're running with a very lean operation, one for every 150 employees. We need the additional support in HR, and I've seen it firsthand with the amount of workload that our HR team has been taking on, and especially in light of with all the policy changes and everything else that's come down is with the various leaves, expanded FMLA, the teleworking, getting those policies, the interactions with employees, the number of questions that they're getting hit with. We've had some challenges, and so you're going to see an ask in here, and will be on your district deliberation list for Wednesday. The other memo that Mike Barnhart is going to be bringing to me any minute, or later today. You don't have to run over here, Mike. The other thing is a reclassification request for an employee who's working in the accounting office, who's been there for quite some time, has picked up some additional responsibilities. There's been a change in the work functions and duties for her position with some changes within the staff, and so we need to reclassify into a position that reflects the duties that are being assigned. So Mike will have that request, and that's going from an accounting clerk to a senior accounting clerk. So 1010, pretty straightforward. Now kind of getting into the numbers, not a lot of changes. Again, this is much like the commissioner's budget. It's mainly general fund, and then there's admin charges for internal contract services or internal charges that are charged to all the non-general fund departments. We also have some exterior contracts, like for YCOM, for being their budget officer and providing HR services. They pay us $25,000 or $24,000 a year for those services that we provide. Running down, other than the reclassification and the new position that I mentioned, you'll actually see a slight change to the FTEs, but nothing substantial. It's all been pretty status quo. In fact, the change that you're seeing with the FTE, you see it goes from 12.23 to 11.93. That was actually moving an additional portion of the HR manager to Fund 80 in recognition of a lot of the risk management, that her position and the risk manager, which she supervises, are both attributed to Fund 80.
And Ken, so this budget does not reflect the FTE increase?
It does not.
Okay, that's what I was seeing, but I want to make sure.
It does not, because we needed the additional funds to get the approval for the additional discretionary funds to go with the position.
Right.
So if we can't, you'll see new positions built into the budget if there's sufficient revenue resources to cover that additional position. But this one comes with a request, not for the full amount, but at least, we do need some funds to come in to cover that additional position.
And right now I'm seeing a beginning balance that's lower than what the beginning balance is. Is that correct?
Yep.
In the memo. I don't know. Maybe I'm looking at the wrong memo. Or in the wrong fund.
I'm not sure what you're asking.
I guess it just says the projected ending balance for Fund 1010 is 58,000, but then the projected beginning balance is 44,000 in Fund 1010.
Right, he's saying Justin's memo is highlighting the additional discretionary. He's saying the 58,000 for the budgeted ending balance of 2021.
Maybe that's just a matter of, I just thought the ending balance and beginning balance were essentially the same thing. Is that not correct?
Well, the beginning balance for 2021 is 44,000. That's the beginning balance. That's what we have projected.
Yeah.
To have remaining for this year. And what he's referring to is the budgeted ending balance for 2021 is what he's referring to.
Oh, okay. Got it. Yep. Perfect.
It's not the beginning balance.
Yeah, no, it's
the ending balance.
Yeah, I see it.
Using a portion of that ending balance in the additional funds.
Perfect. Got it. Thank you.
All right. Other than what I've gone over, really not a lot of changes to 1010, both in, there's a requested changes for the new positions and personnel, and we're really trying to keep it status quo down in the materials. I need to look at something. Now, this is one we may have to change a little bit later. If you look at 1010-513.06 software, you'll see for this year we had 22,000 budgeted, and we've only spent 18. It was a project that's actually, it's a recruiting software for HR that we were planning on implementing this year, and then we ran into COVID. And so that's delayed that because HR really hasn't had a lot of time. I'm not sure if we're going to do that project this year, but this may be another one that we may need to, we might not be able to initiate the project. We'll have to move those funds into an expense line to be reflected in the beginning balance and then be budgeted for next year. Just for the go. So for, we've done almost everything. It's just that once COVID hit HR, they're in no place that they can shut down and do a software implementation project right now. It could change.
For recruiting.
And for recruiting, then we're currently not recruiting a lot of positions right now. There's more to it than just recruiting software. I mean, this is actually something that's very much needed in HR. This is kind of, it's an HR module that we don't have in our current finance system to help them track recruitments, and it's going to benefit countywide. All the departments are going to be, it's much better interface with doing recruitments and processing recruitments all the way from announcement to onboarding.
Well, and that's what I was going to say, Tim, through most of your newer HR systems have that, that recruiting module all the way up to the management module, that you just write the thing and it'll put it out where it needs to go. So it helps with the recruiting, it helps with the tracking, it helps with the management of the recruiting process.
All right. Any questions on 1010?
Just one, 68307. Is that after the software has been purchased, that's the licensing fees? Because it seems like it's jumped
Yes.
from near nothing.
Yeah.
So that's the ongoing.
So the other one, that would be the licensing. A portion of that is the licensing. There's some other licensing that's built in some other software, but yeah, that's the ongoing operation. The other one is a one-time purchase.
Yeah.
That's the for software projects, it's not the.
They come in
It's not
cheap,
fun.
it's the fees after.
Yeah. All right, any questions on 1010? All right. You can go ahead and turn to the next page on page 128, and this is 4161. So we're jumping into Fund 40 is the capital reserve. And 4161, this is, we created this, this fund a number of years ago. This is to help track capital grants. This is just strictly grant projects that aren't necessarily attributed to one specific department, except for Homeland Security. That's usually attributed to emergency management. But this is to provide placeholders for any planned projects or grants that we may be applying for to make sure that we can receive the funds. This is one historically has been used for the trail project. You can see some past actuals going back to 17 to 18. You have the 1.4 million that was part of the ODOT grant to purchase that. We still have some funds for capital contract services that are built into that. I was not prepared to jump into this one, otherwise I would be. It reminds me, and I'll talk to our budget team, that we need to get footnotes added in on this one. We typically have footnotes that describe the projects. And for some reason, the footnotes didn't get displayed. So just a moment while I dig into what numbers this is. What language purchased in 17, 18?
Are you talking about the ODOT grant?
The trail.
That was the trail.
That was the
The trail right away. Yeah. Or not the right away, the tax lot, that's the corridor. And then the communications equipment, I believe, is the one that's the Homeland Security grant,
Okay.
which I think is part of the new upgrade gets to the
I
Office of Emergency Management moved.
I opened up my reminder, so I remember what these numbers are. So the Department of Transportation, the 874,000, that is part of a regional infrastructure grant with Willamette Valley Vineyards. That's a program that the board approved was it a year ago or maybe even a couple of years ago now. It's taken some time where those funds, we're a pass through. It's one of those that they applied, but they had to apply through the county to access the funds. So we're essentially a conduit and a fiscal manager for these funds that are coming through.
Was that bio?
Yes.
Yeah, it's the.
Can't think of the word.
Improvement on 99W.
I think, yeah.
It's a
I think
bio,
no, I think it's just for the road.
Just the road.
oh, just the
You're
road
right,
part?
there is like a
There's a
biodynamic.
biodynamic
Something that was
farm.
earlier, there was that funding, but this is actually for
For
the
the-
improvements. These
Oh,
are
for the road, okay.
To add that turn lane and the, I don't know what you call it, that right turn lane as well.
And, yeah, right turn lane and align with the.
They're widening the road so that there's a turn lane from Archery Summit all the way to Blanchard Lane, I think, River Road. Riverwood.
The 99,000, that's a Homeland Security grant that Emergency Management and Work Under Special Grants is applying for, so we have that placeholder that's in here. 334.99, that 150,000, that's strictly a placeholder. In case we will put placeholders in the budget document, so then we can go after if there's grant opportunities that come up during the year for a specific project or something that may come up, that we have expenditure authority built in. So, so going through, there's nothing, there may be some carryover depending on how things go with the bridge construction, but right now, depending on the outcome of how that project's going, it's anticipated that it's supposed to be finished this year. That's why you're not seeing any ODOT grants specific to the trail in here, because we haven't applied for any of the grants at this point. So the only thing that's budgeted in here is Homeland Security and then that pass-through from Willamette Valley. And then you have the placeholder, and then that 116,000 and 61102. Those are funds left over for the trail related to previous projects, and so those are funds that have been used for smaller projects, clearing, maintenance, things like that have come up related to the grant. So, and that's what we have hit for the trail in this.
So was the bridge funded out of the the land acquisition, or was the land?
No, if you look at the adopted budget, the 1,244,500 under the 1920 column,
Mm-hmm.
that is the Connect Oregon 6 grant. And you can see that 547,000 is spent year to date on that project. And that's the bridge for this current year.
Oh, I see. And then the remainder is the vineyard.
I think that's a separate.
It's separate. We didn't have the vineyard built into this budget. It was something that we identified once we started actually seeing agreements for that vineyard agreement. I was like, hey, we don't have appropriation or anything that's never been added to the budget. And so that's something that we're correcting this year, because the funds are supposed to be for that vineyard project, are supposed to be made available and come through us next budget year.
So Ken, I have a question along those lines. We're keeping track of all of the expenses and staff time and everything associated with the trail. So do we have a budget? Do we have a line item for that somewhere?
We do not. We have a spreadsheet tracker that Carrie Martin reminds us to go in and log any time that staff is spending on the trail, but we don't necessarily have a line item in the budget that tracks that we haven't budgeted any, we don't have a fund in here that's called the trail where we have FTEs or anything built or maintenance or any of that. We haven't gotten that far with the trail.
Because I'm thinking, one of the things is that this is going to be an ongoing expense that we're budgeting, and we have line items for other projects like that we would have that reflected in the budget at some point in time, because it's been going on for quite a while.
Right. Up to this point, outside of a combination of staff time that has been coming out of 1010, 1081, 1010, 1081, county council's budget, there's staff involvement with this project, but not necessarily a budget that's been built specifically for the trail. And early on, the whole discussion about that, because, well, if it's built a trail, will this now suddenly be maintained under 1081, which is the parks budget or some other fund? And we've never gotten that far, because up to this point, it's been get grants, the acquisition. There's a master plan grant that the county has received, but there's no money coming. It's something that ODOT pays directly to do the master plan. So you don't see the project budgeted in here because there's no funds coming from ODOT to pay for that. They're going to pay the contractor directly, and then there'll be staff time associated with participating in that project. So really the only line this has really been the only fund that's been utilized for actual trail expenses, that whether it's the acquisition, the capital contract services, or up above on that 4161 61102 contract services, that's a line where some expenses have been recorded.
So where does the staff time come in here?
It doesn't. It's part of the administrative. A lot of times it's that match, or it's just a portion. If I'm spending a couple hours, if I spend 2 hours on the trail on the project or at meetings or things like that, I don't charge my time to the trail. It's in my line in 1010 that it's just reflected amongst all the other things I'm working on. A portion of that trail time is built into my salary.
Is that a discussion we can have either as a board? Because what I've always wanted to see, what is it costing? What's coming in? What's going out? What is it costing us? And can't look at that as a line item on the budget. And it's a significant enough that I would hope that we could have it reflected to where that somebody looking at the budget could say, okay, this is what it's costing. And I don't know.
And I think, Gary, you're right. I don't have any difficulty with that. That's why, when we worked with her, I worked with Laura 2.5 years ago to set up this at least monitoring, this form that the department heads fill out about how much time is dedicated to the trail. So at least we were capturing that information. Other people are putting it down, whether it's part of the budget, like Ken said, I don't know, but it doesn't translate to the budget. That's the problem.
No.
And, the other thing that I'm just careful with it, because, I'll pick on public works, and if you look at Fund 11, there were just over $2 million in MIP projects, but there's a number of projects throughout that have to do with bridges, roads, variety of projects. And Mark is essentially in charge of all those projects that happen as the public works director. The road supervisors are involved with that. We don't necessarily have line items built into the public works budget that tracks what percentage of their time is dedicated to North Valley Road. Or, we don't necessarily budget down to that level of detail within this budget. And so it's something that we can definitely look at. I think it was something. At some point, the conversation's going to have to be made, especially when it comes to maintenance and operation.
Yeah.
Once it gets to a certain baseline or a certain point, and then where does it go? Does it go to 1081? Does it go to its own fund? Does it, where you have that maintenance and operations, it's not necessarily a one-time project or even though this could be multiple projects over a number of years, and then that's why we try to record all of the projects into 4161, but you're right, it doesn't necessarily track. We don't budget FTEs into this. There's not personnel costs that are budgeted into this, attributed to that, to this specific project.
And I guess that's because it's a capital project fund, right? It's 41 and 61.
It's 4161. You know, it's, and historically, we've not necessarily broke up FTEs amongst projects.
Yeah.
You know,
But this is, I just to argue, which I have for several years, is that, for instance, whether or not it lives with parks, because that was could it live with parks? Could it live with public works? Who owns it? Under whose budget does it come? Is it, where does it live so that we can really look at it and be able to determine what it's cost us and have some kind of tracking where we've seen it, other than people sort of log their hours or not log their hours. I think it's besides it being an internal charge, I think it needs to live somewhere.
and I think at some point, because right now it's a strip of land, and it's not a trail, it's not a railroad court, it's
Property.
It's property, it's 14 miles of corridor.
That's costing money in, money out, expenses to clear. Just that there's just so many moving parts to it. I just would love to see it reflected somewhere.
Well, it seems like we should be able to be tracking at least the legal side. There's been significant amount of legal time devoted to this trail. And if you're an attorney, you mark how many hours you spend on each case. That's pretty typical for an attorney to do. So how is it that that's not being tracked either?
Christian can probably answer more about that when he presents his budget, but the way our office is set up, while a lot of attorneys track and have billable hours, it's not necessarily how we've set up here at Yamhill County. Christian doesn't track his time and then bill the individual departments for the time worked on a certain project. The same thing kind of goes for Todd, he does a lot of land use, but he's been the primary on the trail, is not necessarily tracking billable hours that he's charging to a particular category to cover that time. But Christian can share more about that.
Okay.
Yeah, but Commissioner Sterrett, I think you're right that I'd say you were right and Ken is right that at some point it needs to live somewhere in the budget.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right.
And maybe that's just in the memos section of parks
Sure.
where we just see it. Oh, there it is.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to make sure I don't, because I know there's a few already covered. We covered the budgets that I wanted to cover pretty quickly for this afternoon. I'd like to reserve Fund 80 for tomorrow when we do administrative services and internal services, just because that's such a large budget. I think it would be good to do that tomorrow. I'm looking to see if there's a couple other smaller ones that I can get out of the way, but let's go to to jinx it or anything, but it seems like by having these remote presentations, they actually seem to be going
They
faster.
do go fast.
They're going faster than historically they've gone when everybody's here in person.
Especially with Silas stuff. You only have 6 or 7 people talking about
I didn't want to
that.
say that.
Well, what do you think? What do
I
you
like-
think? What do you think?
She just does like mention somebody off screen. And that's it.
Why
That's
don't
all
we,
she.
She talks fast too.
why
That
don't we
is
go to
very
page
true.
96,
Just thinking about the round
What tab?
tables.
and it's called mediation.
Right.
This is a good segue from trails to mediation.
Perfect, appropriate.
I'm sorry. What page was that?
96.
Okay.
Yeah.
It should be right before economic development
Yeah.
and after the law library.
Mediation.
I can tell you the color, but it doesn't help.
Yeah, Spencer's supposed to have their different people, different colors.
I can't help with that.
That's right, you can't.
It's slightly grayer than not gray.
Because I found that Carrie doesn't necessarily use a color that is standardized for all the binders,
Yeah.
and then also being colorblind, I would be able to tell you which.
I'm blue.
So,
Doesn't sound right.
So mediation services, this is a really quick one. This isn't something, this is funds that are released from the state as part of the various fines and fees on top of court fees and citations. But the funds are released to the county, and then the funds, we have them available to pay for mediation services that the judges order in circuit court. And so we hold the funds, they send people to mediation, and we pay for that mediation via this until the funds are exhausted in the courts. It's one of those,
Oddballs.
you know, this is specific to domestic mediations that has to do with divorce and things like that from circuit court. They're the ones that send the people, notify, and we get the invoices and we pay it.
Do we have contractors, specific contractors for that?
We do. The courts will have agreements with specific mediators that do this work.
Are they local?
I don't know that, you know, because again, this is one that
Sure.
we sign the checks. We get the money from the state, and then we get the invoice. We pay the invoice. We're a true pass-through on this. You know, if there's questions about those, I can reach out to
No,
the court
just-
administrator and find out.
Not to be confused with your community mediators.
Right. Yeah, this is not it's not the same. I don't know if they provide services to the courts, but I don't believe it's.
I don't
Right.
believe they do.
See, this would be a quick one.
Yeah.
Any questions on mediation?
Sure.
Well, I think we're ahead of schedule. I think that's all we have for presentations for today. there any questions I can answer? Because I think, yeah, that's it. That's all the presentations we have for today. Tomorrow, in addition to criminal justice team in the afternoon, there are several budgets that I do have to go over, but it's better to have facilities and Justin involved with those when we go over Fund 40. And then also Fund 80 is a pretty large discussion. I think it's better to say that for tomorrow. As far as schedule goes, we are ahead of schedule by 20 minutes. Unfortunately, the way the public hearing process works, we can't convene that early. We have to open that up at 5:30. So we would meet here at 5:30. It's not going to be a long one because we're not going to have a lot of, it's written testimony only. We'll go through just briefly on what we've received so far in comments and requests that have been received. And we'll make sure those are noted for the record, and then we'll adjourn the hearing.
Ken, so are they limited to the ones that we have here, or they're,
We've had a couple more that have come in. So the one thing I will say that I did not go into detail, but I know there's a lot of I had a spreadsheet. There it is. The one thing I'd like to just mention for Wednesday, the deliberation, when you're hearing a lot of the requests from departments that are bringing up, I just want you to know that we're actually tracking those requests. And it doesn't look that bad when you see it up close, but we'll have a spreadsheet put together that'll help you track for deliberation purposes on Wednesday. I know most of you have seen this before, but so this will give the list of items to make sure we don't miss anything, to make sure we act on those each time. And I just wanted to highlight that, so don't feel like you necessarily have to keep track of, what was the request that Lindsay had for this fund or something like that. So we are tracking those. Any other questions for me? You haven't asked any questions. I keep.
Until 5:30, huh?
So we're adjourning till 5:30 then? All right, let's adjourn till 5:30.
Thanks, Ken. Good job.
thank you.
We can leave everything here.
Yes.
Leave everything here, just secure the room.